The wind, a raw blade honed by the vast, dark water, finds its way beneath the collar of your threadbare coat. It whispers of distances, of the unseen journey across the divide, as you stand sentinel at the International Bridge Toll Plaza at night. Each passing vehicle, a brief, luminous ghost in the perpetual gloom, leaves behind a faint, metallic tang of exhaust, a fleeting memory of warmth before the cold reclaims its dominion. The rhythmic clang of the toll barrier, a monotonous heartbeat in the night, marks the passage of time, of lives moving on, while you remain, anchored in the stark, unyielding present. Your breath plumes, a transient cloud against the harsh glow of the sodium lamps. You watch the procession, a silent, detached observer. Once, your eyes sought patterns in chaos, deciphered the unspoken narratives etched on faces, in the way a hand gripped a steering wheel. Now, you merely count the axles, swipe the cards, offer a practiced, empty nod. This vigil, this desolate post, is your penance, a monument to a past that refuses to fade. A flicker of headlights in the distance, distinct from the usual stream, catches your attention. It's a black sedan, sleek and silent, moving with a predatory grace that feels out of place here, amidst the weary lorries and family sedans. It slows, not for the automated lane, but for yours. The window glides down, revealing a face you haven't seen in years, yet one that remains sharply defined in the archives of your memory. It belongs to a man whose presence once filled rooms, whose words carried the weight of authority. Now, his features are etched deeper with time, the lines around his eyes more pronounced, but the intensity in his gaze remains undimmed. He is simply the superior, a ghost from a life you deliberately buried beneath layers of resignation. Marcus Thorne, he says, his voice a low rumble, cutting through the hum of the idling engine and the rush of the wind. Not a question, but an affirmation, delivered with the quiet certainty of someone who always knew where to find you. You offer no greeting, no feigned surprise. Your gaze remains steady, unwavering. This isn't your usual route, superior. The words are flat, devoid of inflection, a shield against the past he represents. He doesn't flinch, doesn't offer an excuse. Instead, his eyes, dark and knowing, sweep over your worn uniform, the grim lines around your mouth, the shadow of exhaustion that clings to your features. No, it isn't. But some things demand a detour. Some things refuse to stay buried. He pauses, letting the implication hang in the frigid air, a hook already sinking into the raw flesh of your forgotten ambition. Remember the journalist? The one they called the truth seeker? The name hangs unspoken, a phantom limb that aches with a memory. You remember the bylines, stark and fearless, the meticulous research, the unwavering pursuit of difficult truths. You remember the file, thick with inconclusive reports, the dead ends, the official pronouncements of a random, tragic act. In a warning. His final investigation, the one they said was baseless, the one that led to his demise. It's connected to a name that now echoes in every major news cycle. He watches your face, gauging the impact. The name of the journalist, unspoken but understood, ignites a dormant spark. Connected how? A prominent politician, he states, the words precise, deliberate. A man currently campaigning for the highest office. And something else, Marcus. Something far more pervasive. A thread pulled from the very fabric of the elite. Your world narrows to the man in the sedan, to his words, to the impossible weight of what he is suggesting. This was the case that broke you, the one that made you doubt your own judgment, the one that cost you everything. They're calling it a coincidence, the superior says, a hint of disdain in his tone. A ghost from the past, stirring up trouble. But we both know better, don't we? You always knew better. That journalist was onto something real. Something dangerous. And now, that danger is resurfacing, threatening to consume more than just old reputations. He reaches into the inner pocket of his coat, producing a slim, unmarked envelope. Its crisp edges are stark against the dull glow of the interior light. This isn't an official request, Marcus. You're not officially back. This is an opportunity. A chance to finish what you started. A chance to find the truth, the one they buried along with the journalist. You stare at the envelope, at the stark white paper, feeling the magnetic pull of its unknown contents. It feels heavier than it should, burdened with the ghosts of your past, the echoes of your failure. The isolation you've meticulously built around yourself, the quiet resignation you've cultivated, threatens to crumble under the sheer force of this unexpected summons. Why me, you ask, the question a raw rasp in your throat. I'm out. A disgrace. You were there, you signed the papers. A ghost of a smile plays on the superior's lips, a grim acknowledgement of shared history. Precisely, Marcus. You're out. You have nothing left to lose. And you, unlike anyone else, saw the patterns. You saw the truth when everyone else chose to look away. You remember the unblemished rose, don't you? The detail that made no sense in a random act of violence. The superior's gaze holds yours, unwavering. They want this to disappear again. They want you to disappear. But I believe you're the only one who can stop them. The only one who can connect the dots before this entire fragile structure collapses. He pushes the envelope across the console, towards your outstretched, hesitant hand. The address is inside. A warehouse, far from prying eyes. Tomorrow night, midnight. Be there, Marcus, or don't. The choice, for once, is entirely yours. The window hums as it rises, sealing him off once more. The black sedan glides away, merging seamlessly with the night traffic, leaving you standing alone at the toll plaza, the cold wind whipping around you, and the crisp, heavy envelope a stark presence in your hand. The monotonous clang of the barrier resumes, but for you, the rhythm of the night has irrevocably shifted. The monotonous clang of the barrier falls, a final, metallic sigh against the vast, indifferent expanse of the night. The black sedan, a sleek predator, has vanished, leaving only the lingering scent of exhaust and the heavy silence that follows a pronouncement. The paper, thick and unyielding, feels less like a promise and more like a gravestone marker for a life you thought buried. Redemption. It's a phantom limb, an ache for something lost, something you've long convinced yourself no longer exists. Yet, beneath the layers of weariness, a flicker ignites. A spark, small but persistent, born not of ambition, but of a desperate, gnawing need for an answer that has haunted your waking hours and poisoned your sleep. You turn from the desolate plaza, the wind snatching at your coat. The decision, though unspoken, is made. You are pulled back, inexorably, into the vortex you swore to escape. Hours later, the world has shifted from the stark reality of the plaza to the echoing quiet of an abandoned factory district. The air hung thick with the ghosts of industry, a metallic tang on your tongue. This is the contact, the silent conduit. No pleasantries are exchanged, no names uttered. You nod, a single, decisive movement. I do. The acceptance, finally voiced, feels like a key turning in a long-locked mechanism. Without another word, a weathered canvas duffel bag, surprisingly heavy, is dropped at your feet. It lands with a muffled thud, disturbing a cloud of fine dust that dances in the meager light. Its contents hold the fragments of a past that now demand resurrection. Back in your own space, a single bare bulb casts a harsh, unflattering light on the worn surfaces of your small table. The duffel bag, unzipped, spills its secrets onto the scarred wood. Folders, thick with age, yellowed newspaper clippings, grainy photographs, and a small, sealed box of digital media. You begin with the original case. File: the unsolved murder of the investigative journalist, a case that had marked the beginning of your professional undoing. The familiar details unfold: the initial scene, the lack of forced entry, the calculated precision of the act. You trace the lines of the original reports, the flawed assumptions, the dead ends you had tirelessly pursued. Then, you open the newer editions, the files delivered tonight. These are not police reports, but a curated collection of recent political intelligence, financial disclosures, and public relations documents. A glossy pamphlet for a charitable trust catches your eye. Its logo, a stylized serpent coiling around an ornate letter, is etched with unnerving familiarity. You remember it, a fleeting glimpse in the periphery of the journalist's scrawled notes, dismissed then as a meaningless doodle. Now, it screams. You pull out a faded photocopy of the journalist's personal diary entry, dated just weeks before their death. Detailing the prominent politician's latest campaign rally, a photograph of the senator beaming, shaking hands with a representative from the very same charitable trust, the one with the serpent logo. The politician's name, a force in the current presidential race, now resonates with an insidious echo from your past. You spread the documents across the table, connecting the threads. The politician, then a rising star, now a national figure, had been mentioned in the journalist's early inquiries, but only tangentially, dismissed as irrelevant. Now, the connection is undeniable, a subtle, disturbing current running through the stagnant waters of the old case. The police report described the murder as a botched robbery, a desperate narrative that had never truly settled in your gut. But here, in the confluence of these disparate documents, a new, more sinister narrative begins to emerge. And the organization, once a shadowy whisper in a dead person's notebook, now appears to possess a tangible presence, its tendrils reaching into the highest echelons of power. The hope for redemption, once a faint ember, now burns with a fierce, terrifying intensity, fueled by the agonizing truth beginning to unfurl before your eyes. You are no longer just seeking answers, you are confronting a beast that has hidden in plain sight, its scales glinting in the reflected light of power and ambition. And you, Marcus Thorne, are walking directly into its jaws. The photograph, crisp and bright, mocks the shadows that now cling to your every thought. You know, with a certainty that settles deep in your bones, that this is no mere coincidence. The alley where it happened, where the brilliant journalists drew their last breath, remains a stark tableau in your memory. Years have passed, leaving their faint, corrosive mark, but the air still feels thin, stretched taut with the ghost of violence. You drive there, the hum of the engine a dull counterpoint to the insistent drum of your own pulse. This forgotten corner of the city, nestled between a derelict printing press and a crumbling brick warehouse, offers no comfort. The brick wall where the body was found still bears the faint, smudged outline of what was once a bloodstain, now faded to a ghostly rust. You trace the rough mortar with your gloved fingers, a silent apology to the journalist whose relentless pursuit of truth led them here. Your eyes, sharpened by years of looking for what others miss, scour every surface. The official reports had been thorough, or so they claimed, but you remember the haste, the pressure to close the case. They saw a random act, a street mugging gone wrong. You crouch, running your hand along the base of the wall, where weeds push through cracked concrete. Your gaze catches on a small anomaly, almost invisible against the grimy texture. Wedged deep within a narrow fissure, protected from the elements, is a sliver of something unexpected. You carefully pry it free with the tip of a discarded credit card. It's a fragment of parchment, aged and brittle, no larger than your thumbnail. On it, in faded ink, a single, hand-drawn symbol, a stylized owl with an arrow piercing its solitary eye. Beneath it, a series of seemingly random numbers, December 4th, 37. It means nothing to you immediately, a riddle wrapped in forgotten paper, yet a jolt of recognition courses through you. The journalist, meticulous and cunning, would have ensured this was found only by someone looking, someone truly seeing. This wasn't debris, it was a message. You find him hunched over a lukewarm coffee cup in a diner booth that smells of stale grease and ambition. His voice hushed, "I heard you were looking into things." He doesn't meet your gaze directly, instead fixating on the swirling patterns in his coffee. "Just tying up loose ends." You reply, your voice even, though the parchment fragment burns in your pocket. About the journalist. Anything new come to light? Nothing. It was a tragedy, Marcus. A robbery, that's what they said. You know how it is. Some stories just die with the writer. He pauses, finally looking at you, his eyes wide with a warning. Some stories are better left dead. The implication hangs heavy, a shroud over the small table. He pushes his half-eaten Danish away, his appetite clearly gone. "I have a deadline. Good luck, Marcus." He leaves you with the bill and the bitter taste of unspoken threats. Later, you drive towards the border, the city lights fading in your rearview mirror. He works the late shift at a small, independent cargo forwarding company nearby, a ghost in the machine of international trade. You pull your sedan into a dimly lit corner of the Plaza's parking lot, the exhaust fogging the frigid air. The contact, a lean figure in a heavy work jacket, slides into your passenger seat, bringing with him the scent of diesel and cheap tobacco. His face, etched with a lifetime of watching and listening, is drawn tight. "Marcus Thorne," he murmurs, his breath pluming. "Heard you were asking about the dead journalist." "Bad idea, boss. Real bad." "What have you heard?" you press, ignoring his warning. "Anything about the charitable trust? Big fish, they call 'em. Too big for the pond." The journalist was poking at something that wasn't meant to see daylight. Something about money. Lines being crossed. More like a spider's web. And the politician. He's tangled in it, deep. Who are they? He laughs, a dry, rattling sound. Does it matter? They're everywhere, Marcus. In the light. They don't like old stories dug up. Especially not this one. You dig too deep, you might find yourself buried right alongside the journalist. He looks at you, his gaze unwavering. "Walk away, Marcus. before you become another forgotten headline. He opens the door, slipping out as quickly as he arrived, melting back into the stream of trucks and cars flowing across the border. You watch him go, the toll plaza lights reflecting in the wet tarmac like scattered jewels. The cryptic owl, the numbers, the veiled threats, they all coalesce into a single, terrifying truth: powerful forces, unseen and unyielding, are actively working to keep this case entombed. Your path forward is fraught with danger, a winding road through a landscape of lies and deception, but the determination solidifies within you, a hard, unyielding core. You will unearth what they buried. The chill in the air deepens, but it's not the cold that makes you shiver. The stranger's words, a whispered mosaic of dates and a single, resonant name, Ethelred, echo in the silence he leaves behind. The wind carries the scent of exhaust and damp earth, a gritty counterpoint to the enigma now settling in your mind. You slide into your battered sedan, the worn leather cool against your palm. The engine rumbles to life, a familiar comfort. The drive away from the plaza is a blur of highway lights, each one a fleeting thought, a fragment of the puzzle that refuses to coalesce. Ethelred. Not a person, the stranger had implied, but a project. A code. Her apartment, when you'd first entered it years ago, had been a labyrinth of encrypted files and cryptic notes. Back in your cramped apartment, the city's hum a distant thrum against the glass, you spread the journalist's salvaged research across your scarred kitchen table. You've combed through these files countless times, but now, with the stranger's fragmented clues, a new pattern begins to emerge. The journalist had meticulously tracked financial flows, shell corporations, and land acquisitions. Most of it had seemed disparate, a web too vast to untangle. But then you recall a phrase from one of her half-finished articles, buried deep in a draft folder: the Ethelred Initiative, a crown jewel or a poisoned chalice? You type Ethelred into the search bar of her archived files, and the screen flickers, revealing a cascade of documents previously overlooked. Project proposals. Environmental impact assessments. Board meeting minutes. All linked to a monolithic corporate entity known as Viridian Holdings. Viridian Holdings. You remember them from the news, a conglomerate with tentacles in infrastructure, tech, and energy, notorious for their aggressive expansion. As you dig deeper, the connection solidifies. Viridian Holdings is the primary financial backer of Senator Caldwell's presidential campaign. Not just a donor, but the donor, their contributions dwarfing all others. The journalist had been tracking a specific land deal, an enormous tract of undeveloped coastal property, which Viridian was acquiring for a massive eco-resort project, the very Ethelred Initiative. Her research meticulously detailed how the senator, in his previous role, had pushed through legislation that dramatically devalued the land, allowing Viridian to purchase it for a fraction of its worth, displacing thousands in the process. The pieces click into place with a sickening thud. The journalist wasn't killed for random reasons. He was getting too close to exposing a colossal scheme, a powerful corporation using a prominent politician to enrich themselves at the expense of ordinary citizens, all under the guise of progress. The stranger at the plaza hadn't just given you a name, he'd given you the key to the entire conspiracy. The determination hardens in your eyes. This is why they took her. This is why they tried to bury the truth. Not from outside, but from within. The window, directly behind you, gives a soft groan as if sighing under pressure. You freeze, every instinct screaming. The glass is spider-webbed, a single, neat hole marring its surface. A bullet. And it wasn't aimed to miss. A second crack, louder this time, punches through the wall above your head, showering plaster dust onto the journalist's files. You dive, overturning the kitchen table, scattering papers and your laptop across the linoleum floor. The table, now on its side, provides a flimsy barrier. Your heart, though not cliché pounding, is a tight knot in your chest. You push yourself up, eyes scanning the debris, the ruined wall. Someone knows. Someone knows you're digging. The attempt is crude, designed to intimidate, perhaps to wound, but not necessarily to kill. A warning shot, or two. But the message is clear, sharp as the broken glass at your feet. You are stepping on dangerous ground, Marcus. The stakes have just escalated beyond anything you anticipated. This isn't just about redemption anymore. It's about survival. You retrieve your laptop, the screen still miraculously intact, the words of Viridian Holdings glowing defiantly in the shattered light. There's no turning back now. The hunt has become the hunted. The name Viridian Holdings clings to your thoughts like a burr, a persistent irritation in the landscape of corporate behemoths. You pore over the digital files, the journalist's meticulous notes, a labyrinth of interconnected shell companies and offshore accounts. The allegations against Viridian, hinted at in the previous chapter, begin to coalesce into a chilling mosaic: environmental violations buried, labor disputes silenced, political donations flowing like a poisoned river. Each document you open pulls you deeper into the mire. Then, a file. Marked Phoenix Project. The encryption is rudimentary, easily bypassed. You open it, and the screen floods with spreadsheets and memos. A small construction firm, defunct for years, surfaces from the data. Atlas Builders. The name strikes a discordant chord, a forgotten melody from a distant past. You remember Atlas. A minor case, early in your career, a whisper of contract fraud on a municipal project. It was dismissed quickly, tidily. He'd assured you the allegations were baseless, a competitor's smear. Now, the journalist's files paint Atlas Builders as a ghost company, a phantom limb of Viridian Holdings, used to funnel illicit funds. And there, buried in an internal memo, a casual mention of the lieutenant's timely intervention that smoothed over the Atlas Builders inquiry. Was he simply misled, or was his intervention a deliberate act of obfuscation? The thought is a venomous serpent, coiling around your certainty, suffocating the air from your lungs. You push back from the screen, the fluorescent glow of your makeshift office suddenly too harsh, too revealing. The weight of that old case, a minor footnote in a career now defined by a major failure, suddenly feels monumental. Had your own naivete, your trust in a superior, allowed a crucial thread of this conspiracy to unravel unnoticed years ago? The journalist had seen it, had followed the thread. And now, you see it too. The personal connection is a bitter taste, a decision you made, or rather, a decision you didn't question, linked inextricably to this sprawling, deadly mystery. A cryptic entry in the Phoenix Project file catches your eye, a hand-scrawled note scanned into the digital archive: bridge, midnight, red signal. Below it, a date from weeks before the journalist's disappearance. It's a long shot, a desperate reach into the past, but the journalist wouldn't have noted it for nothing. The image of the lieutenant's name, intertwined with Viridian and Atlas Builders, gnaws at you. You need to understand what the journalist was looking for there. The city recedes, replaced by the stark, open expanse of the highway leading to the international crossing. Cars, sparse at this hour, glide through the automated lanes, their tail lights painting fleeting streaks across the damp asphalt. The border patrol booths stand like silent sentinels, their windows reflecting distorted blurs of the passing world. You scan the plaza, the approaches, the distant curve of the bridge disappearing into the haze. There's no red signal, no obvious marker, just the steady pulse of the plaza's functionality. The journalist's note feels like a ghost, a whisper in the wind. He glances around, then pulls out a phone. You watch, your breath held, as he makes a call, his voice a low murmur lost to the distance and the faint roar of passing trucks. Nothing overtly suspicious. Yet, a peculiar tension hangs in the air around him. Then, you see it. It's not going through the crossing. Instead, it idles, its engine a soft thrum. The agent finishes his call, pockets his phone, and walks casually towards the sedan. The driver's window lowers a fraction. The exchange is swift, almost imperceptible, a practiced ballet of illicit commerce. The agent pockets the envelope without a glance, nods, and the sedan glides away, disappearing into the night. Your mind races. Was this what the journalist had witnessed? A clandestine exchange, happening under the nose of official scrutiny? And the red signal? Perhaps a prearranged sign, a fleeting moment of illumination from a specific vehicle, or a light on the bridge itself, indicating the coast was clear. The implications are a fresh wave of nausea. The lieutenant's name, the Phoenix Project, Viridian's tendrils, and now, this quiet transaction at the edge of the country. It all weaves into a tapestry of corruption far more intricate than you had imagined. The agent returns to his booth, his gait unchanged, his face impassive. But you've seen what you needed to see. The name Viridian Holdings, a barbed hook in your mind, had finally snagged something vital. You had wrestled with the journalist's digital archives for days, tracing the serpentine paths of shell companies, each a scale on a larger, unseen serpent. Your eyes, gritty with exhaustion, scanned the last remaining encrypted file, a stubborn lock among the open doors. The journalist's physical notes, scattered across your worn desk like fallen leaves, held the key. A recurring phrase, a pet name for a long-lost sibling, meticulously cross-referenced with a seemingly innocuous date in a personal diary. It clicked. The digital lock yielded with a soft, almost imperceptible thunk. A cascade of data unfurled across your screen, a hidden river breaking through a dam. It laid bare the skeleton of a vast, predatory enterprise. Viridian Holdings, you now understood, was merely the polished facade. Beneath it pulsed a network of influence, a cancerous growth rooted in the highest echelons of power, feeding directly into the current presidential campaign of the prominent politician. The file detailed, in chillingly precise terms, a systematic acquisition of strategic resources, water rights, mineral deposits, energy grids, all funneled through shell corporations that ultimately led back to a single, insidious entity, the sovereign hand. This was the shadowy organization, not merely pulling strings. Weaving the very fabric of the nation's future to its own design. The journalist had documented, with forensic precision, how the politician's campaign was being financed by these illicit gains, effectively buying an election with stolen national assets. And then, the final, brutal revelation. A communication, timestamped days before the journalist's murder, an encrypted directive from an unnamed director within the sovereign hand, chilling in its brevity, silenced the noise. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was an execution, sanctioned at the highest level, to protect a conspiracy that dwarfed anything you had ever imagined. The journalist had stumbled upon the truth, and they had paid the ultimate price. Just as you had once failed to protect the innocent, you now held the evidence of another's sacrifice. A quiet fury began to bloom within you, displacing the lingering ashes of your past failures. This wasn't just about redemption anymore, it was about honoring a fallen truth-seeker, about tearing down a corrupt edifice that threatened to consume everything. You felt the weight of it, the immense, crushing responsibility, but also an unshakable resolve. There was no turning back. The path ahead would be fraught with peril, but the alternative, to let this rot fester, was unthinkable. You would see this through, no matter the personal cost. Your badge might be gone, your reputation in tatters, but your purpose, sharpened by this revelation, was clearer than ever. Your heart hammered, not from fear, but from the jolt of being disconnected. Was it a power fluctuation? Or something more sinister? A new message blinked on your phone, an unknown number, a single line of text to the bridge. Midnight. He knew. He knew. The journalist. It was a phrase from the decrypted file, a small detail about a planned rendezvous. They knew you had found it. The air in your small, cluttered space thickened, growing heavy with menace. This wasn't an invitation, it was a summons, a test, or perhaps, a trap. The city outside your window was a tapestry of distant lights, indifferent to the storm brewing within you. The bridge stretched like a skeletal arm into the inky blackness, connecting worlds. The air here was sharp, tasting of diesel and distant salt. You parked your beat-up sedan a short distance from the toll booths, where the few late-night vehicles slowed to a crawl. There were no figures waiting, no obvious signs of a meeting. Just the ceaseless, indifferent flow of traffic. Then you saw it. Too long. Too still. Your eyes narrowed, focusing on the driver's side window, where a faint, almost imperceptible glint caught the artificial light. A lens. Your hand instinctively went to the hilt of your weapon. They weren't here to meet you, they were here to observe. Or worse, to ensure you didn't leave. The message had been a lure, a way to confirm your discovery. A single figure emerged from the shadow of the sedan, a man in a dark overcoat, his face obscured by the brim of a fedora. He wasn't looking at you, but at the toll booth directly opposite your car. He spoke briefly to the attendant, then slipped something across the counter, not money, but a small, flat object. The attendant, a young woman, glanced nervously at the man, then at her console, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly. The man in the fedora turned, and for a fleeting moment, his eyes met yours across the expanse of the plaza. There was no aggression, no overt threat, just an unnerving certainty. He knew you. He knew what you had found. He slipped back into the sedan, which then smoothly accelerated, merging with the sparse traffic crossing the bridge. As it vanished into the night, you felt a profound sense of isolation. You were truly alone in this. You watched the toll booth attendant, her posture stiff, her gaze fixed on something within her booth. She stared at it for a long moment, then, with a trembling hand, inserted it into her computer terminal. The bridge, the message had said. He knew. The journalist had planned to meet someone here, to pass something on. And now, the sovereign hand was using that same dead drop, that same method, to communicate. Not with you, but with their own assets. Your mind raced, connecting the dots. The static, the encrypted message, the observation, the drop. They weren't just aware, they were active. They were cleaning up. The weight of the world, of this conspiracy, pressed down on you, but your commitment held firm. This was your fight now. And you would not yield. You pulled on your worn leather jacket, the familiar weight a small comfort against the sudden, chilling clarity. They knew. The journalist. The words from the decrypted file echoed, not as an abstract fact, but as a personal threat. The air in your small, cluttered space, usually thick with the scent of old paper and lukewarm coffee, now tasted metallic, sharp with anticipation. This wasn't an invitation, it was a summons, a test, or perhaps, a trap, and you were walking right into it. The city outside hummed, a deceptive lullaby. You stepped onto the street, the damp asphalt reflecting the distant glow of neon. Every shadow seemed to stretch a little longer, every parked car a little too still. Your gaze swept the familiar block, noting the usual late-night dog walker, the couple arguing softly by a lamppost. But then, a flicker. It hadn't been there an hour ago. A muscle in your jaw tightened. This wasn't paranoia, it was instinct, honed by years of walking the razor's edge. You quickened your pace, feigning a destination, turning down a narrow alleyway that smelled of refuse and rain. Your ears strained, catching the faint, almost imperceptible purr of an engine starting, a distant car door closing. They were moving. The game had officially begun. You wove through the city's underbelly, a phantom in the labyrinth of brick and graffiti. You could feel their presence, a low thrum beneath the city's pulse, closing in. Your mind raced, piecing together the fragments, the journalist's last known movements, the cryptic notes, the sudden urgency of the decoded message. This wasn't just about a past failure anymore, it was about survival. A place of transit, a fleeting anonymity, a liminal space where identities blurred. It was a gamble, a desperate hope to lose yourself in the flow of traffic, to cross into another jurisdiction, even if only for a few hours. The approach to the plaza was a funnel of concrete and flickering sodium lamps. The line of vehicles snaked slowly, each brake light a crimson eye in the gloom. You merged into the queue, your old sedan a nondescript vessel amidst the trucks and SUVs. You checked your rearview mirror. There was no mistaking it. Your hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. This wasn't just a tale, this was an active pursuit. They weren't waiting for you to make a mistake, they were forcing your hand. A toll booth operator, a young woman with tired eyes, waved you forward. You fumbled for the exact change, your gaze darting between her and the approaching sedan. Another figure, lean and sharp, silhouetted against the distant city lights. A specific kind of operative, you knew instantly, not just a hired hand. This was the organization's direct reach, their personal touch. The realization hit you like a physical blow. They weren't just monitoring, they were executing. This wasn't about retrieving information, it was about silencing you. You cleared the toll booth, the barrier arm rising with a groan. Ahead, the bridge stretched out, a skeletal arch against the bruised sky. To your left, a small, deserted maintenance access road, rarely used. A desperate, impulsive decision. You swerved, tires squealing, pulling sharply onto the unlit path. The sedan behind you reacted instantly, its engine roaring, headlights blazing as it veered off the main lane, following your reckless trajectory. They were committed. The access road was rough, overgrown, leading to a forgotten customs inspection building, now derelict. Your car bounced violently, suspension groaning. You could hear the sedan gaining, its powerful engine a predator's growl. You knew this area from your old days, a forgotten corner of the border. There was a gap in the fence, a narrow escape route for a man on foot. With a jolt, you slammed on the brakes, cutting the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the approaching roar of the sedan. The sedan screeched to a halt behind your abandoned vehicle, doors flying open. They weren't shouting, weren't calling out. They were simply coming for you. You sprinted towards the rusted chain-link fence, a grim determination hardening your features. Your jacket snagged, but you tore free, squeezing through the gap you remembered, landing hard on the other side. The sound of heavy boots hitting the gravel echoed behind you, closing the distance. You didn't look back. You knew they were there. You were a fugitive now, stripped of badge and name, running on pure instinct. The specific, almost professional precision of their pursuit, the type of operatives they deployed, confirmed it. This wasn't just a political cover-up. This was a deep, entrenched network, willing to go to extreme lengths. The journalist hadn't just stumbled upon a secret, they had threatened the very architecture of their power. And now, so had you. The final components of the conspiracy felt closer, almost within reach, but the cost of touching them would be everything. You were alone, hunted, but in that stark isolation, a fierce resolve ignited. You wouldn't stop. Not now. Not when the truth was so close you could almost taste it. The chilled air of your small apartment, still thick with the ghost of stale coffee and the metallic tang of fear, clung to you like a shroud. They knew. The journalist, whose words had been silenced, had uncovered a truth so venomous it had begun to seep into your own life. Now, armed with the final piece, you understood the full, horrifying scope. Your fingers, steady despite the tremor in your gut, traced the worn leather of the old journal. Not a digital file this time, but paper, brittle with age, yet vibrant with its deadly secret. It had been hidden in a false bottom of the journalist's last delivered package, a physical failsafe against the digital erasure. A crude but brilliant move. The encrypted file you'd finally cracked had been a map, leading you here, to this unassuming book of dates and names. It wasn't a ledger, not in the traditional sense, but a coded diary of transactions, dates, and cryptic references. Each entry, a shard of mirror reflecting a fractured reality. You recognized the candidate's initials, subtly woven into a series of large, unexplained financial transfers. But the true horror lay in the annotations. Tiny, almost imperceptible marks next to certain dates. Dates that aligned perfectly with the journalist's most aggressive investigations. And one specific date, circled twice, just days before the journalist's final broadcast was supposed to air, and the night their life was abruptly extinguished. This wasn't just about financial corruption or political maneuvering. The journalist had been too close, their pen a sword, and the organization had responded with a hammer. The candidate, your old foe, was not merely complicit, he was the gilded cage, the public face of a monstrous design, benefiting directly from the architect's brutal efficiency. This journal, with its meticulous, coded record, was the undeniable proof. It laid bare the financial links, the timeline of suppression, and the horrifying directive that had sealed a brilliant mind's fate. You closed the journal, the soft thud echoing in the stillness. They would not come to you. You had to draw them out, force their hand, expose them in the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Your plan, sharp and dangerous, formed in the crucible of your resolve. A single, anonymous message, delivered through a burner phone, to the campaign manager's secure line. Short. Precise. The journalist's ledger. Tonight. Midnight. Alone. You knew it was a lure, a trap laid by your own hand. They would never come alone. They would never negotiate. They would come to eliminate the threat, to bury the proof and you along with it. But that was the point. You needed them to show their true colors, to confirm their culpability with their desperate aggression. You needed them to step into the light, even if it meant walking into the jaws of the beast. Each mile carried you closer to the precipice. The city, usually a symphony of distant sirens and chatter, felt muted, holding its breath. You clutched the journal, wrapped tightly in a waterproof bag, the weight of it a tangible burden, a sacred trust. The plaza was a desolate expanse of concrete and steel, a liminal space between nations. The automated gates, like skeletal arms, occasionally lifted for a lone 18-wheeler, its roar momentarily shattering the quiet. The wind, a constant, mournful companion, whipped across the open expanse, tugging at your worn leather jacket. The bridge stretched out before you, an illuminated spine across the black water, leading to another country, another life. Tonight, however, your path led only deeper into the heart of this one. You positioned yourself near the furthest, unlit booth, its glass smeared with grime, offering a semblance of cover, a vantage point. Your eyes scanned the approaches, the distant glow of city lights blurring into the horizon. You felt it, the prickle on your skin, the subtle shift in the atmosphere. They were coming. You were the bait, the lure, and the trap was about to spring. This was it. The final pieces were in place. The confrontation, long awaited, hung in the frigid air, a promise of violence and truth. The air, sharp with the tang of diesel and damp concrete, cut through your coat, but the chill that truly settled was not from the wind. It was the waiting. You stood alone, a solitary figure against the vast, dark canvas of the bridge, the rhythmic hum of its distant cables a low, mournful thrum. Your breath plumed, a fleeting ghost in the harsh fluorescent glow. This was the crucible. This was where the truth would either ignite or be extinguished forever. Headlights pierced the gloom, first one, then two, then a convoy of black vehicles emerging from the north approach. They moved with a predatory grace, their engines a growing growl that swallowed the night's quiet. They fanned out, precise and practiced, blocking the exits, trapping you within the concrete confines of the plaza. You counted them, your gaze sweeping across the grim tableau, a dozen, perhaps more, each one an extension of the organization's silent power. Then, the lead car, a sleek, armored sedan, idled directly opposite your position. It was the mastermind, not the politician, but the architect of the politician's ascent, the true puppet master. A slight, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips, a silent acknowledgement of the trap you'd walked into, a trap you'd orchestrated. Marcus Thorne. Encrypted data drive in your pocket, its edges sharp against your palm, a tiny beacon of damning truth. Desperate, perhaps, but not defeated. The paper trail connecting your organization's illicit funding to the politician's campaign. The same politician who publicly mourned their passing, while privately orchestrating their demise. A low chuckle escaped the mastermind. Conjecture, thorn. Recordings, ledgers, encrypted communications. They knew about the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the quiet deals made in abandoned factories and underground bunkers. They knew the politician wasn't just complicit, he was a willing participant, trading influence for power, selling out the very principles he swore to uphold. You pulled a small, satellite-enabled transmitter from your inner coat pocket, its LED blinking a steady green. And now, does the world. You held up the data drive. This contains it all. Every transaction, every coded message, every name. And it's set to broadcast. A dead man's switch. If I fall, this information saturates every news outlet, every social media feed, every corner of the digital globe. Your politician's career will be ash. Your organization, exposed. The mastermind's smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine rage. Fool! You think you can outsmart us? He gestured with a subtle flick of his wrist. You dropped the transmitter, kicking it hard towards the nearest toll booth, hoping the impact wouldn't destroy it but rather activate its final failsafe. You ducked under a sweeping arm, the air whistling past your ear, and slammed your elbow into his solar plexus. He grunted, stumbling back, giving you a precious second. Another enforcer closed in from your flank. You spun, using the momentum to drive your knee into his thigh, hearing a sharp cry of pain. You weren't a fighter like them, but you were desperate, fueled by a righteous fury that lent you an unnatural strength. The adrenaline surged, a hot current through your veins. You needed to buy time, to ensure the broadcast initiated. You scrambled towards the toll booth, the metal structure offering a momentary shield. Shots rang out, the sharp crack echoing across the plaza, sparks flying as bullets ricocheted off the concrete. You pressed yourself against the grimy glass, peering through the bullet-scarred panel, seeing the transmitter lying precariously close to the edge of a drain. Its tiny green light still pulsed. Good. Stop him, the mastermind's voice roared, losing its earlier composure. A heavy boot shattered the glass beside your head, sending shards showering down. You recoiled, a sharp cut blooming on your cheek. A hand reached through, grabbing your collar. You twisted, wrenching free, and retaliated with a desperate punch that connected with bone, sending the enforcer reeling back with a pained yelp. You saw your chance. The data drive was still in your pocket. The transmitter needed to be secured, or at least its signal amplified. You lunged for the toll booth's interior access panel, tearing at the rusty lock. This place, designed to facilitate passage, would now be your fortress, however flimsy. The journalist discovered the truth about the accident that killed the key witness in your last corruption scandal, you yelled, your voice raw, hoping to distract, to sow discord, to buy another precious moment. It wasn't an accident. Not an ideal antenna, but it would have to do. You fumbled for the small, waterproof case holding the data drive, pulling it out. The green light on the transmitter continued its silent vigil. You had to connect it, to give it the boost it needed to pierce their jamming attempts. You heard the metallic clang of a crowbar against the booth's frame, then a groan as the structure began to buckle. They were coming in. Time was an evaporating luxury. With trembling fingers, you plugged the data drive into a port on the transmitter, then, improvising wildly, stripped a wire from the booth's internal comms system and jury-rigged it to the transmitter's antenna, praying for a signal boost. The green light flickered, then intensified, changing to a rapid, urgent pulse. A small, almost inaudible hum emanated from the device. It was broadcasting. It had to be. The booth door groaned, then burst inward. Two enforcers surged through the opening, their faces grim, their intentions clear. You met their charge, a desperate glint in your eyes, knowing that even if you fell here, the truth, once unleashed, could never be fully buried. The journalist would have their justice. And you, Marcus Thorne, would finally find your redemption, even if it cost you everything. The cold bite of the night air was a sharp blade against your exposed skin as your fingers, stiff and trembling, worked with a desperate precision. You pushed the small data drive, slick with condensation, into the raw, exposed wires of the makeshift antenna. A low, guttural thrum resonated through the steel structure of the bridge, a vibration that felt less like machinery and more like the very bones of the world shifting. Overhead, the skeletal framework of the bridge stretched into the inky vastness, its suspension cables glinting under the distant city lights like silver threads holding up a fragile dream. You felt it then, a subtle tremor in the air, a ripple of energy confirming the data's exodus. It was out. The truth, painstakingly unearthed, meticulously catalogued, was no longer yours alone to bear. A wave of profound exhaustion washed over you, sudden and debilitating, leaving your knees weak. The wail came first, a distant, rising keen, then another, closer. Sirens, a growing chorus, announced their arrival. You didn't move, didn't flinch. You merely stood, the small transmitter still clutched in your hand, watching the converging lights like a man awaiting judgment. A squad of vehicles skidded to a halt, their tires spitting gravel. Doors burst open, and figures emerged, silhouetted against the flashing lights, their movements sharp, purposeful. An officer, weapon raised, shouted a command, his voice echoing under the high arch of the bridge. Marcus Thorne, the voice cut through the clamor, closer now. Hands where I can see them. You slowly raised your hands, the transmitter still nestled in one palm, a silent testament. A lead detective, his face a grim mask under the harsh emergency lights, approached, his gaze unwavering. He was a familiar face from your past, a man whose respect you had once held, then squandered. Then back to you, his eyes widening with a dawning, terrible comprehension. The officers around him exchanged glances, their weapons slowly lowering, their postures shifting from aggressive apprehension to stunned disbelief. The prominent politician's carefully constructed facade was crumbling in real time. You saw the flicker of understanding in the lead detective's eyes, the moment the pieces clicked into place for him. He looked at you not as a disgraced former colleague, but as a catalyst, a living, breathing storm front. The immediate aftermath was a blur of official procedures. Your hands were cuffed, not with the brutal force of an arrest, but with a reluctant formality. Questions, a torrent of them, began to pour from the lead detective, from other officers, all demanding explanations, context, proof. You answered, your words precise, devoid of emotion, laying out the logical chain of deductions, the clues you'd followed, the desperate lengths you'd gone to. The initial shock had given way to a quiet, almost reverent awe among the officers. The lead detective, now standing beside you, watched the unfolding news on his phone, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions. They're calling it the Thorne Files, he murmured, his voice low, almost to himself. The politician's campaign manager just resigned. Early reports suggest arrests are already being made at their headquarters. You felt no elation, no surge of personal victory. Only a profound, bone-deep weariness. The image of the investigative journalist, the one whose murder had set you on this perilous path, floated before your mind's eye. A silent acknowledgement. This was not about your redemption, not truly. It was about her. About justice. The cost, however, was still being tallied. You were still in cuffs, a man suspended between the law and its long arm, a pariah turned reluctant hero, or perhaps, simply a man who refused to let the truth remain buried. Your personal reckoning had begun, and with it, the world's. The air shimmers with the heat haze rising from the asphalt, distorted by the incessant glow of amber sodium lamps and the piercing white beams of headlights. You lean against the concrete barrier, the vibrations of passing semi-trucks thrumming through your bones, a low, persistent hum that mirrors the residual tension in your own frame. Ahead, the bridge stretches into the hazy distance, a skeletal armature of steel and cable, disappearing into the mist that clings to the river. Beyond it lies another country, a symbolic threshold, much like the one you now stand upon. The weariness, a profound, bone-deep ache, has not lifted entirely. It has merely settled into a different kind of quiet, a heavy cloak draped over the raw edges of your soul. You watch the parade of vehicles, each a tiny capsule of purpose, rushing towards their destinations, oblivious to the intricate web of deceit and power you have just unraveled. The investigative journalist. Her face, sharp and intelligent, flashes in your mind. A silent acknowledgement passes between you and that memory, a communion across the veil of time and violence. This was not about your redemption, not truly. It was a debt owed, a promise fulfilled not to yourself, but to a truth that deserved to surface. The exposure was not a thunderclap, but a slow, insidious seep. The carefully constructed edifice of the politician's presidential campaign had begun to crack, then crumble, under the weight of the evidence you unearthed. The meticulously documented financial trails, the hushed testimonies of coerced witnesses, the leaked internal memos all pointed not merely to corruption, but to a chilling disregard for human life, a casual cruelty wielded from the highest echelons. The murder, once dismissed as a random act of street violence, was now undeniably a calculated silencing, orchestrated to protect a future of unchecked power. You remember the face of the operative, the one who finally broke under the pressure of the meticulous dossier you had assembled. His confession, delivered in a secure underground bunker, was not dramatic, but clinical, a chilling recitation of orders given and executed. But you had severed a significant head. The politician's withdrawal from the race, cloaked in vague health concerns, was the first tremor. The subsequent arrests of key campaign strategists and influential financiers were the aftershocks. A hand settles on your shoulder, firm and familiar. You turn to see the detective, his face etched with a similar weariness. With a spark of something new in his eyes, respect, perhaps. A shared understanding of the murky depths you both navigate. "It's done, Marcus," he says, his voice low, almost lost in the ambient hum of the plaza. For now, at least. The journalist's family. They have answers. And that's more than most get. You nod, the words settling within you. Answers. A semblance of justice. The phrase feels inadequate, a small stone against a mountain, yet it is real. The true puppeteers, those who pull strings from unseen vantage points, will merely retreat further into their labyrinthine networks. You know this. The tension you feel is not the thrill of victory. The badge is gone, your official standing erased. Yet, the drive, the unyielding pursuit of truth, remains. It has sharpened, honed by the crucible of this long, desperate journey. You are a man unburdened by the institutional constraints that once confined you, yet bound by a deeper, more personal code. The wind tugs at your coat, urging you forward. The path ahead is uncertain, a winding road through landscapes yet unknown. But the ghosts of your past, the haunting image of the journalist, have found their peace, and in that, so have you. The redemption wasn't a return to what was lost, but an evolution into something new, something forged in the fires of injustice. The journey continues, albeit on your own terms.